Hi, I'm Norman Liss, and the name of the program is The Way to Go. I invite you to join me each week at this time as we explore places to go and things to do. One of the real hidden finds in museums in New York City is the Fashion Institute of Technology Museum. And my guest today is Dorothy Globus, who is the director of the FIT Museum. And Dorothy, I'm glad you could join us today, and you're going to take us on a fascinating trip to really, as I said, one of the jewels. So the real question is, what makes the FIT Museum so unique?
Well, I think that the museum at FIT is based upon a wonderful collection of clothing and accessories, mainly of the 20th century. It has a huge resource. It has been driven in the past by its connection to the Fashion Institute of Technology, which is a unique New York institution in its own right. It's partly a community college. It's partly in the SUNY program, and it's also supported by the City of New York. It's in the heart of the fashion and apparel business district.
27th Street and 7th Avenue.
Yes, and it's a place where you can really come and look at the issues of fashion, and I really am trying to make people realize that fashion is broader than just the clothes we wear, but it's the houses we live in and how we decorate our environments and how we're subjected to advertising and communications, and it's also about the business and technology of fashion.
I have to agree with you. I'm not a fashion person, and yet I have been coming to the exhibits for many, many years. I try never to miss one, partially because of the way they are presented. They are presented with such great taste and unique qualities about them that I find them really this to be one of the best places to go.
Well, I'm actually only recently affiliated with the museum at FIT. I have been at the Cooper Hewitt Museum for 20 years prior to this, and so that my real love is exhibitions rather than specifically fashion. I, too, have always followed the shows at FIT. I think it's a tribute to my predecessors, and they've done things with great panache and style, and it's been a very lively series of exhibitions that they have offered to the city of New York, and it's always been fun. In fact, at Cooper Hewitt, we often would say, why can't we have fun like they have at FIT?
But talking about panache and style, let's talk about the major exhibit that you have now, which is the Jeffrey Bean exhibit. And we do have here a catalog cover, and it's got wonderful illustrations in it. And this cover, of course, shows in black and white, one of Jeffrey Bean's great creations. Quite a unique man, isn't he?
He's a remarkable man. We did this exhibition as part of the celebration of his being a designer for 30 years, and he is truly one of the great American masters of design. And it was a real privilege for me as my first big exhibition to work with Mr. Bean. I certainly learned an awful lot about fashion in a very short amount of time, and it will affect my subsequent behavior, I think, at the museum. It was really fantastic to work with him. He's completely devoted to his craft, and he has the most extraordinary understanding of fabric and how clothes should fit on the body, and I don't think he's subject to the winds of fashion that blow up and down the knee and all sorts of things. He's following his own course. He has kept outside of the mainstream, and I don't think as many people have been aware of Jeffrey Bean as of some of the other designers who've spent a lot of time working on their persona, because he's been so committed to what he's doing that he hasn't put as much effort into the promotion of it. And I think that really shows in this exhibition. And I've had more people come up to me and say, I'm not really interested in fashion, but I was absolutely fascinated by this exhibition. And when they were at the opening, they said they would come back. And I think it really makes you think about clothing in a completely different way.
Sure does. Let's go through it a little bit.
Okay.
We have some photos that show various aspects of it. What is this one that we have here now?
This is a cluster of clothes that are made. We group them in one way because they're all blue and white, and Mr. Bean loves stripes. But what's really unique about this group of clothing is that most of it is based on men's shirting, which is not normally something that you can do the kinds of things that he has transformed it into. There are jackets, which are 3 and 4 layers of blue and white striped men's shirting that then get meticulously quilted together, and that adds a stiffness, and a little jacket or a vest is put over a loosely flowing one-layer dress that goes with the blue and white, and he's constantly exploring the possibilities of fabrics that way, and it's particularly amazing what he has done with supple, thin, lightweight shirting and making it into jackets and suits and things.
What I like about going to the museum is the fact that the explanations are so clear. They really tell you a lot. And then I had the wonderful experience when I went there that there was a class from the FIT with the instructor talking about each of the things. And I kind of hung around the outskirts of it and listened to her, and it was eloquent, which brought it even more to life, and it was great to do that. And it is part of the education.
Well, that's one of the major goals of the museum, is that it is a complement to the programs at FIT, and of course fashion design is one of the major aspects. All aspects of the production of fashion are taught at FIT, and so that virtually any of the classes can come down there and discuss their own aspects of the process in terms of the clothes that are on
view. And it really works well, but not only for people at FIT, but for the entire fashion industry, I suppose.
Sure. We are used very heavily by the fashion industry. In fact, the collection at the museum has a membership of designers who come in and they study the clothes if they're looking into a new line, or and in the textile department you can actually borrow swatches if you're a member of this group, so that it's definitely a resource in many different senses of the word.
What are we looking at now?
This is one of Mr. Bean's gray flannel series. Gray flannel is another sort of signature fabric of his, again, taking a menswear fabric and transforming it into the most elegant of clothing. This one is also where he is showing his interest in revealing new zones of the female body, and in this case, there's sort of a trompe-l'oeil illusion of 2 slits which are filled in with rhinestones underneath the breasts, and sometimes he'll do this with netting, sometimes it will be actual cut-out openings, but he's very playful and whimsical as he plays around with these ideas of showing different parts of the body.
He's clever, isn't he?
He's very clever, and he loves it. He has fun with it, and he likes to do these little witty comments.
What I like about this museum is that everything is presented in a way that the presentation itself is something that you go to see. I remember, for example, the swimsuit exhibit that was there, where they took this huge room, and in this room, they just covered the floor with sand, and the people who attended the museum walked on boardwalks, seeing,
that was a great show.
Seeing these torsos coming out of the sand. And one of the things about this exhibit, and we do have an illustration that shows that, is the ramps where the mannequins go up in an incline in this huge room. And
well, I think that there's a huge gallery at FIT, which is really one of the biggest spaces, probably outside of spaces, say, at the Metropolitan, of equivalent scale, but it's a beautifully proportioned room. I think it usually works best when it's wide open. And this exhibition, our designer, Abbott Miller, came up with a brilliant idea of a pair of crossing stairs. They're great, huge stairs that start at 12 feet, and we made them 4 feet by 4 feet wide steps so that we could have enough room to show the mannequins on them, so that you get this incredibly graceful descent from the top of the room down. And so the space is filled with these beautiful architectural elements. And one of the things that Mr. Bean is very concerned about is the notion of his clothes in motion. And these are sort of frozen moments as you step down the stairs. You get a sense of movement in the stairwells.
But there's something else in that room.
Yes, in the middle of the room, there is this kind of ethereal projection of a number of dancers modeling 10 of the pieces that are on view in the exhibition, so that you really see them in motion, because you can't understand these clothes until you see them moving.
But they're also projected on Scrim?
Well, they start on one, a dancer kind of emerges from the mist wearing one of the dresses and doing things that make the movement of the dress make sense. And she kind of is small and she gets very big, and then she bounces to a scrim in the middle and she's sort of ghost-like, and then she moves away from you to the other end of the room and she disappears and you see the dress from behind, and then the next dancer comes from the other direction, so that they're sort of gently dancing across the room and back again.
It's a great effect, and then of course there's something else that's involved, and that is that you have these books set out so that people who really seriously want to look at the details can look at each of these. It's I notice you've got them held down very securely, and
This is actually an area that I'm really interested in terms of exhibition design that I've begun getting into lately, and I think it's always interesting to learn about a subject in as many different ways as possible. And for Geoffrey Beene, he amazingly has saved sketches from all his seasons, and so that we had access to this terrific archive, and we couldn't show all of these drawings lovingly framed and occupying a lot of space on the wall where I think they would have begun to look like wallpaper. So we photographed the drawings and we put them into plastic sleeves, and so that you can flip through them and you get a sequential experience. And we also have books of like an entire season's line, so that you can really see what he was doing at any given time and how he was taking an idea and trying it in different patterns and fabrics and for night and day wear. And there are also scrapbooks because he cares about every single design detail down to the label in the back of the dress. And so I have a little sort of scrapbook of ephemera with invitations to his showings, and even the press kits are wonderful. And I thought it was really important to show his complete devotion to this thing down to the finest detail. I mean, he thinks about every zipper and button, and he's got great zippers and buttons too.
What's this illustration that we now have?
Well, this is part of the group that we began calling the Gypsy Troupe. It's this incredible, lavish dressing for fancy occasions, and it's this combination of all kinds of materials. There's net that's covered with little spots, and it's put over lace, and then they're lavish embroideries in sequins and silks, and this great beautiful scarf, and it's just all this kind of sumptuous fabric. It's really reveling in fabric and what it can do, and putting pieces together, kinds of fabric together that you wouldn't think could work with each other. And he just has this amazing touch when it comes to the juxtapositions of fabrics.
Putting together his designs is one thing. Putting together this exhibit is another. Now, I gather from what you're saying that he was actively involved in deciding what would be shown, how it would be shown.
Yes, we had, I think, as with many successful exhibitions, it was a collaborative effort, and it was very difficult to just sort of decide who did what in the end, because it became such a seamless experience. But Mr. Beene was there. He was, especially in the last weeks of the installation, he came down every day, even though he was working on the next season's designs as well. And we worked with a lot of his staff. They were down there helping us style these clothes, and we all had a great time together. I mean, it was really kind of sad when it all broke up and everybody had to sort of say goodbye and go on with the rest of their lives, because it was a period in time when we all worked very intensely together, and the people who work with him are absolutely wonderful, and we had fun.
Where did these clothes come from?
Well, actually, one of the reasons we could have so much fun with these clothes is that they do belong to Mr. Beene. He has amassed an archive of over 2,000 pieces from the years past, and I think he's had a real vision just in that regard in terms of saving these things, because otherwise they get dispersed. You don't normally think about what you did in the past because you're so busy looking to the future. I think that's a phenomenon of many companies and businesses. And they were his clothes, so he could do what he wanted with them. And once an object goes into a museum, certain restrictions are applied to it. And we didn't have to work with those restrictions. Obviously, we were concerned that we display these things according to museum standards, but with Mr. Beene there giving his blessing on how you might arrange them, you could sort of adjust the scarf so that it flows around the hip, or you can make an arm do something that it wouldn't normally do on a rigid mannequin. And that was another reason why I think the show works so successfully.
Is it a common practice that you do work with the designers when you do an exhibit of their works?
Well, I mean, if it's a living designer, yes, you certainly have that
Otherwise
opportunity.
you don't, right?
Well, I come from Cooper Hewitt, where we didn't do shows with living
Right.
artists. I think you had to be dead to get a one-man show at Cooper Hewitt, as is the case with many institutions. But that's another reason why I think there's so much vitality at FIT, because they really are looking at the present and the near present, and so that you do have contact with what's happening at this very moment.
Coming here to FIT after many years at Cooper Hewitt, and before that the Smithsonian, is a new experience for you. It's a very specific direction. There are a lot of challenges, and I assume that you have to plan far in advance of what you're going to be doing. How far in advance are you thinking now?
Well, I'm working into 2 and 3 years ahead of time. This is, in fact, FIT hasn't in the past thought as far ahead of time as it probably ought to have been, so that many of the shows came together at the 11th hour, which over the long run gets kind of exhausting for your staff. And so I'm trying to set up a longer range schedule than it has been in the past, and I think that also will help get people more aware of what we're doing so that they can anticipate what's coming next. And
Now you have 2 floors of exhibit space, although I do recall that in the lobby area a few years ago there was a T-shirt exhibit,
Right.
which was very entertaining, very amusing, and so there's other space that's available, and also probably in other parts of FIT where you could do
well,
things.
yes, our operation does get involved in showing the work of students and different projects in various lobbies of the building, but our main emphasis and our big exhibitions are in the galleries and in the Shirley Goodman Resource Center, also known as E-Building.
Now, many of the exhibits will take both floors, but also you have them as 2 separate places where...
I plan to think generally about doing exhibitions separately, one on each floor, because I find it difficult to get, walk down a set of steps in the midst of trying to concentrate on an exhibition. I also think that there's been a tendency to make exhibitions which are really too big, and I think that after a while, even the most veteran museum goers' feet get tired, and you think with your feet, and you begin to just kind of wander aimlessly through something, and you stop absorbing after a certain amount of time. And there's plenty of room in either of our gallery areas to cover a topic.
It's interesting
thoroughly.
that you mentioned that. A tour guide once used the term, which I understand very clearly, called museum feet.
Right. Sensible shoes.
That's from standing still in one place too long, basically, and it certainly is something when you're planning, you have to do that. Now, talking about the separate floors, you do have a very, very interesting exhibit on the upper floor in the museum. So why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Okay. One of the mandates when I was hired recently was that I should plan a series of exhibitions that express the broader scope of FIT. I think that in the past, the fashion exhibitions have been so successful that it's only reinforced the notion that FIT is only a place for fashion. In fact, it has many more programs, and so that coming from a design museum, I was excited to be given the challenge of broadening the scope of the exhibitions. I mean, it's really one of the reasons that got me very interested in working there. And so for my opening salvo in this arena, I have just installed an exhibition called Visual Instructions and User Manuals, which comes from Europe.
It's a subject that touches us all.
It certainly does. People say, what's that? And that is that objects in our lives today need more and more explanation, and just because things get simpler doesn't mean that they get easier to operate. And so that we have taken an exhibition which has been circulating in Europe. It was organized by a group in Rotterdam, and it was also, there was input from a graphic designer in Holland named Paul Meixenaar, as well as the Design Museum in Zurich.
And talking about instructions, one that we're all accustomed to seeing, but maybe don't think of as instruction manual, is those wonderful cards that appear on airplanes and tell us what to do in case.
Emergency, yes, airplane emergency cards are ubiquitous. They're required by law in every aircraft, and in fact, every single company has a different one. And you may, when you see there are four cases full of these various manuals and cards in the show, and when you see that many of them, you really do ask, why do you need so many different kinds of instructions for what's basically the same thing? Would it be better to do a universal emergency exit card? There are differences from aircraft model, one to the next, but nonetheless, there are basic safety tips, and it's just incredible the
how different they
the
are.
variety. Yeah.
But they bring into all of the factors that are outlined so carefully in the exhibit, which is there are many ways to give instructions, and especially if you're dealing in a multilingual situation, such as the use of hands, the use of photographs, such things that you don't really have to use anything but the illustration to say what you want, and of course that covers, but so many simple things that we do, we get instructions for. You know the old saying, as a last resort, read the instruction book.
Right. Well, I think that's a very important statement, because we actually have a little manual for the exhibition, and we've mounted it on every single one of the cases, which are not particularly labeled, but no one's reading the manual, so that they come in and they don't know what the show's about, because like with every other product, they don't read this manual, and they really should be reading it in order to understand the show.
I think the interesting thing about this manual is the fact that it's in multi-language. So that it kind of says no matter what language you speak, you can read these manuals. But it also says that manuals have to treat with all sorts of people who may not understand the language. One of the amusing things that I think is the portion of the exhibit that talks about things that are translated by someone who only has access to a dictionary.
Right. Actually there's a man out west who has just recently run a competition for the worst manual of the year, and no translations were permitted to be entered in that contest because it's almost by definition. It's very difficult to describe how to do something, and you have to do it in as simple terminology as possible. And sometimes visual elements are added to it, but there are other manuals where there aren't any visual elements, or they're just kind of add-on because of the attitude of whoever is producing this manual. And one of the prevailing thoughts is that among many manual writers is that the pictures are extra and not necessary. But the fact is that I think people learn in different ways. I have a very good friend who has never liked Macintosh. He's a writer. He's very verbal. He bought a Mac and he couldn't use it. He just couldn't deal with the icons. I love a Mac because it is visual, and he uses an IBM because he likes all that verbal stuff. And I think we all learn in different ways, and no one manual is going to be a perfect solution for everyone. And the other thing is how much time you're willing to put into it. There was just a very amusing article in the Wall Street Journal. It was amusing but also very telling about people who are now buying computers who are not techno nerds of any sort. And one woman called up and said, I can't use this thing. And he said, follow the manual. And she said, I just spent $2,000 on this computer. I'll be damned if I'm going to read a book about it. And sort of sums it right up.
What we don't realize is that some of the basic things that we do need instructions, like this book that you brought along on what?
This is on making string figures and cat's cradles, and these are actually very ancient games that are played in many cultures. And so this is a nice book that shows sort of step-by-step things on how to do cat's cradle or how to do Jacob's ladder. And we have an interactive portion in the exhibition, and one of the challenges is to do cat's cradle with somebody. That's a two-man string game. So we have strings hanging, and we have all the diagrams for the steps of cat's cradle in it.
But I think that you talk about the portion of the exhibit that deals with participation by the visitors, deals with a very interesting subject that I think men are probably more involved with than women, though women do have the problem doing that. So why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Okay. Well, I think that tying a necktie is perhaps a process that fewer and few or younger men are learning how to do. Certainly kids don't want to wear neckties. That we're sort of loosening our attitude about wearing ties. But those who still go to formal occasions who feel that they don't want to wear a clip-on bow tie have to tie it. I have ended up sort of barely learning from my father how to tie a bow tie so that I can tie one for my husband whenever we go to a formal occasion. But it's a sweat every time. I mean, it's, am I going to make it? How many times is it going to take before I get through it? So that in the exhibition, in our interactive areas, we also have a number of generic ties and bow ties, and we encourage people to try to follow the instructions on how to tie one.
Do people actually pick them up? I don't dare try it. I thought it was like riding a bicycle, that once you knew how to do it, you could always do it. So before we went on the air with this program, I tried to take the sample that you brought along and tie the tie, and I don't remember how to do it.
Because you were kind of on the spot. I think if you were sort of doing it automatically and you do it on a regular basis, it would be one thing. But it's like, how many times does one really wear a fancy black tie where you need a bow tie? And so you kind of have to sort of reconstruct it each time.
But I'll tell you the interesting part about that, and men learn this when their sons are growing up. You can very easily tie your own tie, but to tie it in the opposite direction on someone else is impossible. And I and other fathers went through this thing. We just put our son in front of us and tied it like we normally tie it.
Well, that's how, that's one of the solutions. I, in fact, only know how to tie a bow tie facing my husband because I can't do it from behind because I learned it the other way. So I'm kind of like the mirror image.
Yes.
And we have two sets of instructions for tying ties in the show. One of them that you're showing is the one that is based on the steps in mirror reflection, but the other one is the regular direction for looking at it. So it gets even more confusing, and I frankly haven't tried to follow these instructions myself. I think I've decided in the course of thinking a lot about this exhibition and taking a lot of people through it, and I see new things each time. I realize that what I love to do is I love to assemble things, and so that I can follow the steps in a manual when they're very handily starting at number one and going up to whatever the end product is. But the end result is a completed object. I put together the barbecue. I love putting Legos together with my son. But when it comes to something like operating the VCR, I call my kids. I don't have the patience to learn those multiple overlapping functions. It just doesn't grab me.
Well, I think people, if they come down and see your exhibit at the FIT Museum, they will learn a lot about instruction books and how to do things. And I thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, it's been fun.
My guest today has been Dorothy Globus, who is the director of the museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology. It's a great museum. Go there. Enjoy it. I'm Norman Liss. The name of the program is The Way to Go. And so next week at the same time, enjoy yourself.